This is how the movie begins. With the release of a new movie on Disney+, Candace Against the Universe, Phineas and Ferb is finally back. Is what I would say if the past 5 years weren't filled with attempts to keep the show alive through backdoor pilots, various internet shorts, and a season-spanning crossover with Milo Murphy's Law that reeks of late 2016.
Candace, what are you doing here?
I'm playing Ducky Mogo. Yeah, I got the chartreuse one.
Usually, I would be up for a continuation to one of my favorite cartoons of all time. It could be a fun bookend to the series' original run, like the Dexter's Lab TV movie, Ego Trip. I've also made it clear how much I adore Across the Second Dimension for really taking advantage of its runtime and source material, so I should be game for a pseudo-sequel, right? But the track record of Disney Channel cartoon revivals is, well, barely even a track record at all. And the premise of Candace Against the Universe appears to be very familiar. Not only did Season 2 of Milo Murphy's Law heavily feature its characters in an alien abduction plot I wasn't fond of, but the premise of Candace's brothers rescuing her from a distant planet where she's respected shared a lot of similarities with the Season 1 episode Unfair Science Fair Redux. So much so that you might as well call it Unfair Science Fair Redux Redux. This movie was shaping up to be content simply for the sake of having content. But you know what? It turned out to be
okay!
In a recent interview, the creators spoke about how they threw out an entire storyline premise when developing Candace Against the Universe, because they wanted something that would help introduce the show to a new generation. I think being so interwoven with a decade-old cartoon limited the appeal of Milo Murphy's Law, so I understand the want to make this feature accessible to all. However, the film doesn't quite accomplish this goal when it comes to its first act. When recently reviewing this franchise's first film, I admired how it effortlessly set up its tone and lightly foreshadowed future events while not being too alienating to any newcomers. Here, we're thrown into the middle of an average day for the characters that begins with Candace telling viewers about her maddening daily routine with limited instances of actually showing it. There's also an awkward transition to
Doofenshmirtz Incorporated
that asks the audience to accept this pharmacist fighting a platypus in a fedora without either character's MO made clear. This whole scenario is very easy for longtime fans to accept, but I could see the unfamiliar audience members this was partially aimed at being confused. Nothing about this invention of the day is particularly special or cinematic, but it's enough to be the breaking point for Candace's character arc that's at the center of the film. This is an average setup that would feel more at home in a 44-minute special, but it's brought down by some questionable visual direction. Snipple Animation was one of 3 different animation studios to touch this project, and if you watch the video Toonrific Tariq did where he analyzed the series directing, then you'll see how important little details were in making the show look as great as it did. The first 20 minutes of Candace Against the Universe shows what happens when loads of those minor intricacies are simultaneously stripped away. The outlines around the characters are so thick and don't get thinner as the camera zooms in. Facial expressions are either extremely on model or too close to a board artist's specific style. Forget Candace's eyes changing between episodes. Now they change between shots that are right next to each other. I hope you're up for some good old images that will stare into your soul. Some drawings look straight out of Season 1, and if this was Season 1, I'd be more accepting of the way this looks, because those episodes are a little rough around the edges. They're much more intentionally and charmingly inconsistent, but the show was still figuring out the way it wanted to look. Snipple segments take a big step back from a style that gradually evolved over 4 seasons, and their issues are too frequent to overlook. This is more of a general issue, but the use of decently composited CGI here is a bit excessive. I get using it to create assets that are viewed from different angles, or move in a 3-dimensional space, but it feels excessive when applied to less complex props like Candace's bike and this prison transport vehicle. I'd be more down with the implementation of these elements if they didn't stick out like a sore thumb, and that critique applies to so many of Snipple's shots that it's hard to overlook them as a whole. I know that the pandemic impacted the last few months of this film's production, but by that point, it was likely deep into post-production, which doesn't excuse about 25% of the animation for looking subpar. I think Snipple probably did the best job they could, given that they were asked to tackle a style very different from what they specialize in. Hiring them was likely a decision to save time and money more than anything else. I know I'm in the minority with how much this issue bothered me, because the animation isn't even bad on a technical level, and for every shot I raised an eyebrow at, there's 2 more that look fine. It's just a little too off-model too often to be passable to my stupid, critical, and occasionally nitpicky mind. So if you didn't take issue with it, more power to you. The way it looks in motion digs up some long-forgotten memories of the Doofenshmirtz Daily Dirt web show, and I'm not sure if these are better left forgotten.
Why don't you like My Little Pony? It's the best thing aside from anime and bubble tea. Answer this, answer Derpface. But seriously, answer this.
Where is the planet? It is like 8 systems away. We will need a much more powerful quantum field generator.
But could we do it?
Yes, but even if we got the whole gang together, it would still take at least a montage.
This is one of the few jokes in the first act that stood out to me, but it also made me realize how fast its pacing is. They cut 2 songs out that would have acted as sorely needed breathers, but we'll get to those later. Although I can't pretend like the first part of the runtime is completely worthless, since it contains a scene that grabbed my interest in a way I wasn't expecting. In the series finale, Last Day of Summer, Candace finally learns the value of trying to make the most of every day, understanding the motivation behind the way her brothers spent their summer vacation. It's good development, but it's not as meaningful as Doofenshmirtz finally doing what his daughter always believed he could do and turning over a new leaf to become a good guy. Due to Candace's specific goal and attitude about busting her brothers being central to the plot of every episode, the series didn't have the chance to have Candace overcome this issue in a manner that held some lasting significance. There's a few plot points from the series that were left open-ended, but given closure to Candace's character was one ripe for an emotional exploration. And I'm happy to say that Candace Against the Universe focuses on exactly that. Just as Vanessa was the instigator for Doof's breakthrough in Last Day of Summer, she's also the first person to question if there's a deeper meaning to the goal Candace has dedicated her summer to.
Is it possible that your obsession with busting them is really just a distraction from your real problem, which is how you feel about yourself?
You mean like a tiny, meaningless speck in the universe, completely overshadowed by Phineas and Ferb?
I think it was a good choice to use Vanessa to set the story in motion, because she's an outsider who isn't as familiar with Phineas and Ferb shenanigans. Vanessa is also the most down-to-earth of the child characters. Well, maybe not in this case. I'm glad she didn't get cut from another movie, but I wish she played a more significant role. There isn't any conflict between her and Heinz. In fact, they don't even interact until the 56-minute mark. Same goes for Perry the Platypus. I liked having the secret agent act as a guardian angel, helping his friends from the shadows. But it takes away potential screen time he could have with his nemesis. Vanessa gets abducted alongside Candace for the sole reason of having her father join the rescue party. The Flynn Fletchers and friends have crossed paths with Dr. Doofenshmirtz enough times for the very thought of it to no longer be exciting, but they do take advantage of his presence by having him extensively interact with the main group.
But what's with your neck?
Wait, what's wrong with my neck?
Oh no, is the episode where these two met not canon anymore? If so, then this is a sad day for Buford x Baljeet shippers everywhere. I like how they gave everyone in this group of incredibly well-spoken children something to do or deal with. Like Phineas feeling guilty about how he's treated Candace, Buford valuing a canoe over his own life, and Ferb, well, I'm not sure if it's his new voice actor or how he has more lines than ever before, but his portrayal took some time for me to get used to.
Roblox.
Once the cast arrived on the planet of Feebla Oot, the movie began to win me over. The visuals received a slight overhaul that made all the difference, and the drawings that pushed the expressions started to look funny instead of wrong. I believe this act was mostly tackled by Synergy Animation. They worked on the original series throughout the entirety of its run, so their stuff looks straight out of season 4. The lighting was also upgraded, having more shadows and lens flares to differentiate this location from Earth. Candace is immediately worshipped around the planet after she's taken in by its ruler, Super Big Doctor. Yes, all of the aliens have gibberish names, but they never get old.
Braxing 1010, shoe monkey, fire up the ship.
It's obvious that things on this alien utopia aren't quite what they seem, but the twist is creative and foreshadowed very well through the dialogue and background details. Candace also briefly questions if this is all too good to be true, which I like. I'm glad the film gives her a chance to be an active protagonist, despite part of the plot centering around rescuing Candace. Ali Wong's performance as SSBD rides the line between menacing and sisterly, and the way she relates to Candace's sibling experiences helps sell this predictably plotted portion of the flick. Tiffany Haddish also guest stars, and I won't give it away, but she makes the most impactful Disney cameo since Tom Hanks appeared in Big City Greens.
Kids, look, a celebrity.
Hey, Green family, it's me, Tom Hanks.
I almost forgot the biggest name they got to do a voice, Cosmo from the Fairly Odd Parents.
The patrols will be here at any minute. Follow us.
One thing that the comedy consistently falls back on are long, drawn-out gags, often paired with minimal animation. These feel like a carryover from Milo Murphy's Law that likely only made it into the final cut because they weren't constrained by an 11-minute time frame. Some of these are admittedly funny, or better when they're called back to, but the sheer number of these kinds of gags puts a damper on the pacing. They could have used that time to have more lines that were clearly recorded at the last minute due to the pandemic.
We found you.
Come on, is it really that hard to keep some consistency between audio? Now before I dive into Act 3, here's a spoiler warning to skip ahead to 2105. But first, we're going to have an ad break.
Get those kids!
Get those kids! Get those kids! Get those kids!
Oh, did you notice that isn't Thor in the shot? Yo! What the f?
So I watched this movie with my friends who worked with me on the AWCA Files video collab, and that viewing was a mess. We had an argument over whether or not Candace was justified in pushing her brothers away once she's found a place where she feels accepted.
I finally feel like the universe isn't against me. And I can't help but think, but maybe that's because you guys aren't around.
Tariq brought up the point that Phineas and Ferb love and respect Candace, but don't understand her process of trying to bust them.
You guys would help me bust you?
Sure, if it'll make you happy.
Every day the boys have the time of their lives and usually don't see how tirelessly their sister works to achieve a goal that always ends in failure. It's only after Candace snaps at him that Phineas comes to terms with how much misery he and Ferb have unintentionally provided her.
I mean, I know sometimes she seems kinda
Obsessive? Volatile?
enchanting. Terrifying. I was gonna say unhappy, but I had no idea how unhappy she's been.
To keep Candace sympathetic, she immediately shows regret over blaming the boys for problems that have always been her own. This sets the stage for my favorite scene in the movie. With Across the Second Dimension, that honor went to a high-stakes, action-packed climax, not an intimate reconciliation. But both of those scenes boil down to the same theme: trust. Candace finally sees that her brothers have always looked up to her, and their inventions were intended to entertain her just as much as they entertained them.
Summer would be no fun without you. We just wish you could see yourself the way we see you.
Though it wasn't always clear to Candace, the boys have her back, and that's why when given the perfect opportunity to at the end of the film, Candace doesn't bust her brothers. Not out of guilt, but because she finally trusts them. This is the Candace development that Last Day of Summer needed. And as for why it doesn't carry over into that episode, or why no one references this time they met Dr. D, I think the characters may have gotten their minds erased again.
Excellent work.
Act 3 is a string of ambitious and emotional sequences, and the fourth wall break is pretty fun too. Most of it is animated by Yearn Productions. Their work isn't as on model as Synergy's, but some action and character acting moves pretty fluidly. While Candace is in the midst of trying to commit genocide on an alien race, which is somewhat justified, it feels out of place when we briefly cut to Stacy and Jeremy. Candace's friends probably should have had a more important role in a movie all about her, but I do like the revelation that Jeremy's in the LARPing. If the show was still around, this could have been the basis for a great Candace subplot. But hey, Jeremy finally became interesting, and it only took 12 years.
As a matter of fact, I object to this union.
Another surprising aspect was the score. Composer Danny Jacob has been one of the franchise's most valuable players, arranging both the score and songs, and being the one who sings
Doofenshmirtz in his underwear.
His score for Candace Against the Universe blew me away. He adds some orchestral flair to established themes, gives Fibla Oot its own musical style, and even turns the stinger from the intro into a motif. for the songs. Just as I did for Across the Second Dimension, let's rank them all from worst to best. Number 13, Chop Away at My Heart. This sounds exactly like the song from Milo Murphy's Law with the same name. What a ripoff! Number 12, Girls Day Out. The lyrics aren't exceptional, but I like the 2000s pop vibe it has. While slightly forgettable, I'm glad the soundtrack has laid-back tracks like this to match the variety of the original series. Number 11, Such a Beautiful Day. Thanks to this number's catchy chorus, Candace's drive and anxiety is one of the few things I feel is properly introduced. The rock section is alright, but it breaks up the flow, and the stills in the background, while painted quite well, are crudely tossed on screen. It's a fine number, but didn't make for the strongest first impression. Number 10, This Is Our Battle Song. I don't think this works too well outside of its original context, but I suppose it was a fun gag to turn into a brief march.
You lied to us! Through song!
I hate when people do that.
Number 9, Step Into the Great Unknown. Ironic how a song about stopping to find your bearings was cut for time. The 70s style instrumental is pretty cool, but I'm not sure why this was a Phineas and Isabella duet. The lyrics are also very wordy, similar to some of the dialogue from this point in the movie, but I'd probably enjoy it more if I saw the visuals intended for it. Number 8, We're Back. Very disappointed that Disney didn't give the creative team enough money to animate this promotional song, so its music video was forced to use recycled clips.
The magic of digital editing.
I give them props for lip syncing though, and I like all the little character references strung throughout this upbeat ensemble rock tune. Similarly to Kick It Up a Notch before it, it's weird to hear a song advertising a movie that you just watched.
We're back, and we're feeling groovy. On Disney Plus, you can watch our brand new movie.
Number 7, Space Adventure. It's an adventure in space. If I wasn't a big fan, I probably wouldn't have thought Baljeet obsessing over space adventure throughout the journey was so clever, because it was a satisfying reference to his dedicated fandom seen in Season 2's Nerds of a Feather. I'm fond of how subtle most of the callbacks in this movie were. Like, look, there's Baljeet's life coach that was mauled by evil clones of Perry in the Halloween Anthology episode. Remember him? Number 6, Meet Our Leader. As far as the movie's drawn-out gags go, this was by far my favorite. Its high energy and fast pace makes it easy to overlook how pointless it is. I think the battle song is grounded in a better joke, but I'm a sucker for big Broadway show tunes. I saw that some people were horrified by the several seconds of flossing on screen, but this is the same franchise that made a caramel dancing joke in 2014, so outdated dance fads are par for the course. Number 5, The Universe is Against Me. This is basically Mysterious Force 2, as it's another Candace rock anthem that was likely cut for time. The full version is worth a listen for how it shows off Ashley Tisdale's range, and the backing track goes hard, especially during that ending sax section. Number 4, Unsung Hero. A tongue-in-cheek ballad about Perry the Platypus is one of the most out-of-left-field concepts here, but it creates a fun contrast to a creatively staged moment of action. Number 3, Silhouettes. It might be the most familiar sounding song, but I always dig whenever the song lyrics get self-aware. The graphics that accompany the end credits are a tad simple, but I like how they frame the obligatory end credit scene. Number 2, Adulting. Shoehorning Dr. Doofenshmirtz into the plot was justified, purely by having him play off of Isabella. Having the natural leader butt heads with the stubborn sloucher was a strong dynamic I could have used a scene or two more of. I like how this upbeat duet encapsulated their relationship on this mission, and also how it adapts a bit to each of their vocal styles. Number 1.
It's us against the universe!
I think the film succeeded in recapturing the magic of previous big finale songs, like Carpe Diem and Summer Belongs to You. Everyone in the main cast gets a moment in the spotlight, and its energy, visual variety, and positive message close Candace against the universe on the best possible note. One line in particular stuck with me.
And friends are also family, we're not just talking blood relation.
One aspect of the show that I don't think is discussed enough is how it shows acceptance of unconventional families. Vanessa comes to appreciate her divorced father, and Phineas and Ferb are stepbrothers. I'm surprised the latter fact isn't common knowledge, since it's a part of the series synopsis. We never see Phineas's father and Ferb's mother because that's not important. It's a fun, open-ended aspect to speculate on, but all that matters is that the characters have come to terms with this change. This underlying message really comes full circle here in the movie, with how super big Doctor calls Candace her sister, and how Phineas, Ferb, and Candace finally understand each other. even though this message was delivered through heavy-handed dialogue about being special or a chosen one, showing this loving relationship within an unconventional family is important to show to viewers of all ages. Filtering the story through Candace's inner turmoil and giving her a redemption arc of sorts is what I think justified this film's existence. But I don't think she was the only thing here that was redeemed. The ending is so strong and uplifting that it's easy to forget its rocky beginnings. It's common for movies to get better as they go along, but I went from disapproving of its very concept to admiring its storytelling and presentation. The structure was a little jumbled, the animation had its highs and lows, it isn't the perfect introduction, and the premise played it safe, but its heart was always in the right place. It might not always feel like a full-fledged film, but it still has some inspired locales, music, and humor that reminded me why these characters are so enduring without needing to forcefully modernize them.
While I love ominous patch-related threats more than anyone, right, apart from Ferb, big fan.
I'd say it's about on par with Last Day of Summer, especially because this doesn't have to worry about being a potential finale. If you're any kind of fan of the original series, I recommend you watch this, especially so that we can get the movie that the creators originally wanted to make. I'd prefer that to another crossover, and if the creative team can find new ways to explore this classic world, I'll be looking forward to it. If making videos on Phineas and Ferb has taught me anything, it's that it can bring people of all kinds together, and Candace Against the Universe accomplishes that, and so much more.
What are you kids up to?
Just the usual, us against the universe.
We win.
Oh no! I almost forgot to talk at length about my headcanon that Perry the Platypus is intersex. I can do it in 25 seconds. To be intersex means to have both male and female traits, and Perry the Platypus fits the duckbill. His femininity is apparent in his theme song, which refers to Perry as, quote, an egg-laying mammal of action, and in Does This Duckbill Make Me Look Fat? He Sweats Milk. Candace may have switched bodies with him, but the milk was still produced by Perry's body. In Primal Perry, Perry uses his poisonous ankle spurs in defense, which is a masculine feature. Now you're probably wondering why I feel so strongly about this topic, and it's because